As Julia brought up, our topic today is accelerating digital systems engineering and what that's really looking like for NAVAIR and NAWCWD. So this slide is really going over what our deck is going to be talking about. And this is really the story of this journey. And we're going to start with, why does the Department of War need to change? And what does the Department of War want to change? And so really trying to present that very, very high level of an understanding of why we are making these decisions to adopt digital system engineering. We also want to talk about specifically NAWCWD's response to the Department of War call to action. We're then going to deep dive into some of the DSE implementation methods. And more importantly, we're going to talk about, how do we know if this is working? How are we measuring our progress as we are going through this adoption journey? Moving on to my next slide. So really quickly, I want to get into the why before the what. And really, why are we even making this change? So at the highest levels of government, there has been a recognition that traditionally it takes us a long time to build out systems. And that overall, the Department of War moves very slowly when it comes to the development of our technology products. So because of this slowness, there is very much a recognition that we need to change, that we need to move more quickly. And especially in the environment of today, rapid reactions, rapid capability development is very, very important. Just some really quick examples that you guys all see in the news. We have had the situation with Venezuela. We currently have the Iran situation happening. And we also have China in the background. And so all of these things are rapidly unfolding, and we need to be able to move very, very quickly. So now that we've discussed the why before the what, moving into, what is that change going to be? So that change that the Department of War decided to lean into was digital engineering, which is essentially a framework. It is a full-scale approach to improving how we do engineering by understanding and knowing where all of our data is, digitally connecting it and using it across the entire life cycle of products to support all of the engineering activities from concept through disposal. So again, this is a very large concept. It is a very large framework as well for how to approach this need for speed and this necessity for changing how we are approaching our S&T practices. So when we get to the digital system engineering piece, as I pointed out, digital engineering is very large, and it encompasses all of the S&T activities within that framework. So within digital engineering, we then have system engineering. System engineering is essentially the management of a complex system and putting that complex system together. Digital system engineering is right beneath that system engineering circle that you see. Digital system engineering is essentially where we intersect digital practices with those traditional system engineering methodologies. Currently, system engineering, as we all know, primarily uses paper-based products to move forward with requirements and technical documents. with digital system engineering, we are really looking to replace those paper-based documents with models, authoritative sources of truth, and additional digital products. One thing I do want to point out here is that digital system engineering is often mixed up with model-based system engineering. And the reason why it's mixed up is because model-based system engineering is a very specific methodology within that DSE construct. Model-based system engineering is a structured approach for how to use system architecture models to develop complex systems. So it is a little bit confusing, but I did want to point that out. Moving on to the next slide. So again, what are those high-level strategic goals that the Department of War is looking at? So you can read through this slide. Just giving everyone a minute to read through it. When you look at all of these goals, the big thing is that the DoD is focused on people, processes, data, and infrastructure. And all of these goals are focused around that goal of developing our people and changing our culture, how we are going to more efficiently use and manage our data and know where it exists. There's also very much an emphasis on infrastructure development and what is going to need to happen for the infrastructure to support digital engineering and digital system engineering. And also those processes that are going to need to be changed or moved into a digital workflow to help gain efficiencies. So after presenting to you that overall larger picture of what the Department of War is looking at, I'm now going to talk about how NAWCWD responded to that call to action. So first and foremost, one of the investments that NAWCWD made was to stand up a digital engineering office underneath the NAWCWD chief engineer. The other item that I really want to point out with our office is that we are not meant to be an enduring office. We are a temporary office stood up to catalyze the change necessary to move the command in the direction of digital engineering and to fully adopt digital system engineering practices into the way that we do business so that culturally people aren't scratching their heads or they have a question mark whenever anyone says digital system engineering or digital engineering. We should just know what it is and we should understand the processes necessary to support digital system engineering. When this has been achieved, our strategic office is going to be stood down. And right now, we have been on a 5-year plan for this effort. And I will talk more about that in the slides coming up. So this vision is the vision of our NAWCWD strategic office for what we want the workforce to be able to do when our office is gone. You can read the vision yourselves, but what's really important to us is that when we look into this future, what we see is that technical reviews are performed using models, not documents. Artifacts that are generated from these technical reviews are produced from the models. So there could be a document output, but that document didn't come from someone creating a PowerPoint or an Excel file. That information was an output generated from the model, and the model lives as the authoritative source of truth. Another vision that we would hope for is that people are capable of reading and accessing these models and knowing where they can find their information so that folks are no longer having to hunt for information in various databases or in individual computers. Mission. This is our mission both for the people who reside within NAWCWD and for our office. Our mission is to empower people. That means we want our office to be empowered. We also want the people of NAWCWD to be empowered. We also want to focus on optimizing processes. You heard me talk a little bit earlier about how there are existing workflows that are not particularly efficient, and we really want to look at how to modernize and digitize some of those processes to streamline efficiencies. We also we also have a mission to leverage tools because a lot of the tools that we use are outdated. And so how do we move forward and leverage tools that can help us optimize these processes? We are also looking at harnessing data. I brought up earlier the example of data existing in different places and spaces. And how do we learn how to identify where that single source of data is going to be? Or how do we connect our data across these different silos so that we know how to access it and that we can easily access it as well? Values. So, what are the values of both our office and the values that we would like the NOC personnel to take on? So one is transparency using model-based approaches. I a lot of times I don't think people mean to be untransparent right now, but I feel oftentimes when you hand someone a 1,000-page document and say, "Hey, you need to read this document to understand what's happening," while you are providing information, that information is not necessarily transparent to the person who is receiving it because there is a lot of effort that they need to put in to dig into that document and find that information. And what we're really hoping for is that by using model-based approaches where we have a model to look at, we can start to create that transparency. We also want to create cross-disciplinary collaboration to help break down those data silos that I mentioned earlier. We also want to improve efficiency. Again, foot stomping those digitized workflows and identifying processes where we can start to automate some of them. Definitely continuous learning. In this new world that we are moving into, we talk about the idea of learning and relearning. This is something that is really important from a value perspective because that leads into the huge culture change that we need to make, which is really having an open and curious mindset. Right now, we live in very interesting times which can make it difficult to have that open and curious mindset because when you live in interesting times, it can be a little bit scary. But to be able to move forward into this new construct, I really encourage everyone to try and find that curiosity within themselves for how we can be more open to these changes that are occurring. So our NOCWD strategic priorities, again, tying this back to the Department of War, we are very focused on people, processes, data, and infrastructure. And so as you look at these strategic priorities, you can see on the data side, we are trying to advance the digital thread. Again, this is really being able to develop visualizations of where the data is flowing from and coming from. When we talk about that institutionalization of model-based practices, We typically are more focused on that adoption of model-based system engineering because because we feel that that is the best methodology that is available to the command at this moment in time. When we talk about the digital ready workforce, it's really that people component. It is the upskilling, it is the training, it is the providing on the job experience so that folks are capable and able of utilizing these digital skill sets. One of the things that we have done to support that effort is by creating cross competency training tracks. We also have created a fully self paced virtual hub so that folks can learn about these digital skills on their own time. Digital twin capability is an area that we really want to lean into. However, we haven't done a lot of it. So it's definitely something we are going to focus on in FY27 and FY28. The collaboration, ecosystem integration, and the infrastructure, we're really focused on developing a digital engineering environment. This is something that was stood up in FY25, and we've been continuing to work on in FY26 as a capital improvement project, and that is to develop a digital engineering environment that makes all of these things that we are talking about possible and accessible. So to advance that digital thread, we are building an environment so that people can visualize it. When we talk about developing that digital ready workforce, we're creating that environment so that people can practice the skill sets that they develop. So some key activities, this is starting to get more specific about specific things that we are doing to support those priorities that I discussed earlier. And so some of the things that we do are hackathons and summits. Jennifer is going to talk more about this. We also have physical and virtual hubs, which I mentioned earlier. The virtual hubs are shared online on SharePoint, and it is accessible to everyone at NAWCWD and at NAVAIR as well. We also have a physical hub located at China Lake. It is building WDK MC001, and it's a place where you can come and practice using your skill sets or talk with some specialists in subject matter areas that you are interested in. We're also leaning into measurements and dashboards so that we can measure our activities and also share with the workforce how we are doing. We also like to communicate everything that we are doing and our success stories. We do that via a newsletter that we put out on a quarterly basis, and also by sharing our success stories on our virtual hubs. So moving into the roadmap that ties everything that I have been talking about together, you can see in FY25 that was very much our stand-up. So yes, I know this is a 6-year roadmap, and I said that we were going to be here for 5 years. But you have to accept change because change can happen. So in FY25, that was our foundational setup and strategy validation. And this was really getting that physical infrastructure stood up and also pivoting our training from a cohort model to that self-paced model. FY26 this year, we have been very, very heavily focused on that digital engineering environment for both the prototyping piece and the developmental piece. We are also working on bringing in that initial group of users who can help us test out this environment. In FY27, we are really looking to scale and transform everything that we've been doing in FY25 and FY26. So what that looks like is really leaning into program adoption. So working very, very closely with our various technical project offices to help them start to adopt the use of the digital engineering environment, adoption of model-based system engineering, and also adoption of using the virtual hubs as a place to train and upskill their workforce. We also want to improve the robusticity of that environment and scale, so make it significantly larger and more accessible. For FY28, what we really want to lean into is what we call that end-to-end digital thread. And what that really looks like is our current digital thread that we have been prototyping has primarily been focused on the design phase of the life cycle. When we look at that end-to-end digital thread, we're looking at design to production. So actually the cutting of the metal for the product that we are trying to develop. And we want to be able to visualize that across the command. We also really want to focus on that command ROI of what has been gained over the past 3 years and what has the command gotten essentially from the stand up of this temporary office. FY29 is where we are really looking at the sunset of the office and handing over everything that we have done back to the existing competencies. So that's very much going to be that sunset, handing off, partnering, and essentially training the trainers so that they can then continue all of the work that we have done. I'm now going to hand over this presentation to Jennifer Ambrecht, who is going to talk about our implementation methods, as well as our measurements and how we know we're doing well. Over to you, Jennifer.
Great. Thank you, Wendy. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to give you a sample of some of the different methods that we've implemented to get after some of the strategic initiatives that Wendy walked you through. So, slide, please. The first one I'm going to talk to you about is something that we call model-based test and evaluation hackathons. We created this series of events to get after the strategic initiative of institutionalizing model-based practices. So this was a series that was designed to create collaboration and innovation about how we are essentially doing model-based engineering. And specifically because test and evaluation is such a large majority of the business that we do at NAWCWD, we specifically wanted to focus how we connect model-based practices into our traditional test and evaluation life cycle. And these hackathon events essentially provide our workforce the opportunity to come on in and get hands-on experience with industry-leading tools to develop models and connect models into simulation environments to essentially change our traditional systems engineering V into a more collapsed, streamlined, model-based continuum. So we are iteratively looking and consistently looking at how we can essentially conduct test as a continuum, all the way from the front end, defining mission engineering and gap analysis products through system-of-system validation and everything in between. So far, we have held 2 events under this series. We had initially planned to hold quarterly events. We have not quite been able to meet that cadence. It's a little bit too demanding on the people we have available to put that cadence of events on. So we've held 2, and we plan in this next year to essentially keep a biannual cadence. Our first event that we held in August of 2025 was focused on model-based T&E integration and alignment. So for this event, we were really focused on establishing a solid foundation of model-based systems engineering and model-based T&E practices. What we did was we took models that represented artifacts from 3 different domains of engineering around a weapon system. So we took models from a mission domain, a systems engineering domain, and a T&E domain of a specific test event. And what we did was we looked at how all of the data was presented across these models and identified where we could create connections and associations between the data. And we heavily leaned upon a upcoming standard that is being studied under a CISO, Simulation Standard Organization Working Group, to use something that was a little bit more mature rather than starting from nothing. So using that, we were able to clearly define integration between different domains of models and connect data and exchange mechanisms to set us up for Event 2. In Event 2, which we conducted in May of 2026 this year, we were able to build upon the foundation of Event 1. And essentially, we were able to prove out that we could automate the verification of requirements that come from mission systems or T&E domains through those MBSE modeling products, connect that data into a high fidelity simulation, right? Get results from the simulation back out, transport results back into our authoritative source of truth around requirements, and based on the data that comes in from the simulation results, automatically show through parametrics and constraint expressions when a model has passed or failed a specific test run. And we were successful in that. So looking forward into the future, we plan to continue to build upon this momentum. We have a couple of different ideas on where we could go in the future. For example, how we could, one area of exploration is how we can drive model-based execution from a MBSE like mission model representation into an effects-based simulation. And the other area we're going to explore is we did Event 1 and 2 with a pilot program that we support at NAWCWD. We would look to see if we could expand it to another project and see if we can get the same success results. All right, slide, please. The second initiative I'm going to talk to you about is what we call a Digital Engineering Technology Summit. This is a series that we stood up to get after the initiative of building a digital ready culture. So this is an awareness series that we designed so that we could bring together our workforce across NAWCWD and create a culture of transparency and collaboration. So each summit we do has a slightly different focus because we're always trying to look at how we can bring in new ideas to share awareness across what's going on inside, WD project space, industry space, get like interactive demos and hands-on examples of real work that's being done, and bring innovation and new ideas to teams, things that maybe they haven't thought about before. So this is a brand new series that we started in FY26. We held 2 summits last year. We plan to continue the biannual cadence into next year. And for our first summit, we kicked off with trying to focus on project awareness and technical exchange across the NAWCWD workforce. So we did a small showcase where we took about a dozen projects from NAWCWD, and we brought everyone into essentially a technical interchange meeting. So people got to learn about the different kinds of projects that were implementing new digital methodologies, the tools that they were using, the concepts they were exploring. And that created some great connections for our workforce, some awareness of things that were going on that people had no idea about that were happening. And we had some good initial, I would say, like collaboration going on just from that first meeting alone. Summit 2, we just held in July, and we took a completely different approach to Summit 2. For Summit 2, we decided to theme it to digital thread in a day. And this summit specifically focused on the concept of digital threads. We partnered with industry. We wanted to bring in examples, tools, demonstrations outside of NAWCWD to really show the workforce the art of the possible, especially since this is an area that is not really being adopted yet inside, quite frankly, the Navy, certainly not at NAWCWD. It's a new area to get into. So with that summit, we had an entire half day where the workforce got to come in and see all of the leading technologies and capabilities from industry. We have received great feedback from our workforce on that event. People made good contacts into companies, not only for tools, but we also had some of the contract support vendors there. So people had an avenue to go to a company to get people and help, right, for maybe some staffing shortages they had. We have not stepped into designing our next two summits next year. We're getting ready to do that as we wrap up this current fiscal year. All right, next slide, please. So I'm going to wrap it up by talking about how do we know that all of these initiatives we've outlined and the implementation plans we put forth are working. Slide, please. So we have been trying to define a measurement framework. We've defined an initial set of measures you see here so that we can give ourselves a starting point for how we would track progress against different things we're doing to demonstrate that we are obtaining success in our transformation efforts. The specific area that we have made the most progress on so far in not only defining the metrics for success, but also finding data sources, which is the really hard part. Is workforce readiness. It was kind of the easiest one to go after for us because we have an enterprise system across the Navy that actually tracks training, attendance, and feedback. So we did have an existing data source to pull from to get after, for example, cumulative percentage of who's taking training and in what specific competency. So we started creating some dashboards. We've shown samples to our senior leadership team, and we have an initial concept of how we're going to get after workforce readiness. For some of the rest of these that are on here, for example, I'll pick on ecosystem maturity next. We know that once we stand up our digital engineering environment, we onboard initial users, which we're currently working on. We want to use that environment to track essentially an indicator of adoption, right? How many active users do we have that have accounts in that environment? What percentage of our licenses for the tool sets are taken up on, in any given day or week? And so we'd be looking to pull metrics from that environment to give us indications on how adoption is going, as well as how we need to grow the environment to support potentially like a greater curve of adoption than we anticipated. And our initial target there, which is open to change as we learn more, is we want a minimum of 5 WD projects to utilize the environment and digital thread capabilities for systems engineering, design review, and T&E integration by the end of FY28. On command value and efficiency, this is going to be a very hard one for us to pull together. We've got an initial idea of how we could measure success, an idea of what a target might look like. However, gathering the right data for this one is going to be pretty hard. Today, most of our data on project milestones, rework costs, delivery schedules are all held within individual silos. So this one is really going to require kind of that greater cultural transformation and changes in the way that we operate before we can have a consistent enterprise level data source to get after looking at command value and efficiency. And then finally, transition readiness. We've got an idea on what a successful transition might look like, but we're not going to put a lot of time into this one until we get further in our roadmap, maybe down into the end of FY28. So these are initial thoughts at what success might look like, and I'm sure our categories and metrics will continue to evolve over time, but these are our initial thoughts on what a measurement framework is going to be for us.